Thank you, Joe, for that kind introduction. And I can't tell you how good it is to be here this morning down at Crystal Gardens, which is the site of many good things and many memories. And I want to give a very special thank you to Ron Hendricks, and everyone at the Southern Wayne Regional Chamber. Mary and I have known each other. She knew me when I was a Republican. She knew me when I became a Democrat. But this tells you how many decades Mary and I have known each other. And she has remained a good and wonderful friend. And I want to thank everybody for making these forums possible, but more importantly for what everybody in this room does to keep the Downrivers strong and vibrant. Downrivers are my home, will always be my home, and John Dingell's heart and soul will always be Downriver. You know, this is actually a tradition that started with John. I don't know how many decades it's gone on. And you know what? Rituals and traditions are not a bad thing. And I plan on continuing it for years to come. It's a good way to kick off the year, talk about what's happening in Washington, and I want to make sure you know what I'm thinking on the key issues, but a good way to answer your questions is as well. And I guess before I get into this, I'm just looking at this room, and what's exciting, I see a ton of friends. Some I've known for decades. I look at, you know, I got to tell you, getting redistricted, I'm already off script, knew it would happen. You all know it happens every year. Getting redistricted was really hard. I'm looking at me, they're the same. I miss Wyandotte more than anybody could know. But I don't want to miss it because you still got me. You're my friend. I talk to BASF all the time, and I'm there, and you know, you have friends. And I look at this room, and I love the young people. You know what's great about this room is the young to the seasoned. There is nobody old in this room. But some of us have been through a lot, and we need to help teach you what we learned. And you are 20% of our population and 100% of our future. So I think of the different things that I've learned with so many people around this room, the friendships, the bonds, the mayors that are in this room that I'll still see at meetings and the DCC, Jim, down at the DCC is such, I love everybody in this room. And it, you know, I think this is all, a hard time for me too, because it comes right as we head into the anniversary of John's death. John Dingell will always be part of the Downriver, and he'll always be here. And you guys helped me get through the worst time of my life, and you still give me the strength that I need and the support that I need to keep doing this job. But I'll also tell you, people in the Downrivers keep me real every day too. I was at one of the restaurants, I won't tell you, in Trenton, when somebody drove by and had some pretty weird words, and it helps you know people are not happy with government all the time too, which unfortunately the local mayors can tell you almost every day of the week. You know, it's hard being a member of Congress, but I'm going to make this, being a mayor, having to be accountable for trash and snow and all the things that matter in everyday's lives. Nobody says thank you. And everybody bitches, excuse my language. We need to thank our local state officials for all that they do, and the county commissioners too. Let's just give them a thanks this morning. And I've told the mayors this, that I made this promise to Mayor Sam and BSF. Sri will get down there, he'll be there. But I'm going to work with Sri and Rashida as we do this, although Rashida does not have a lot of the Downrivers anymore. She's moved she got Dearborn, which is my house and my home. But we're going to work together. Members of Congress are going to work together for you. But let's begin to talk about the issues that we care about and the priorities. But even as I start that, maybe I should talk about what the last 3 weeks have been like, which have been interesting. You know, we were into Christmas Eve, as we had the omnibus and until 3 a.m. one night, 4 a.m. the next, 2 a.m. Christmas Eve, we didn't get out till 4 o'clock, but we knew we had to get it done. We had to get it done for the people of this country. And then we had the snowstorm and the ice storm, and planes weren't working, and COVID was at its height. And yes, Debbie Dingell, the mask girl. Notice how many of you have seen me without a mask in 3 years? Well, I had COVID. I got it through the mask. So the doctor says I'm good for it. I have all 5 of my boosters. And to be honest, I wouldn't have known I had it. Was supposed to go see the president and got tested and had it. And I didn't. I was really not bad because I had my 5 boosters, although I did get that, what they call it, something after. But we do still. COVID's not gone, gang. I mean, I'm going to encourage everybody and take my public service opportunity to encourage people to get your boosters, get your initial vaccines if you haven't had them, because I didn't have a fever. I didn't get a cough. And I'm one of the lucky ones. I don't want to end up in the hospital. But then we went from that to the week that was watching the election of the Speaker of the House of Representatives, which was not one of the better moments for democracy. But we got him elected, and people saw what we were like on the House of the floor when we're unruly. And I'm someone that thinks we should open up the floor of the House to cameras 24 hours a day, and you should be able to see what's happening. Now I'm going back tonight, and we are voting on some, this is what I don't like. We're voting on some rules that are really just meant as, or it's laws that have not been, we've done the rules, now we're doing laws that have not been through regular order, have not been through process, and are just being set up as got-yet bills. We set up a China committee, but a lot of people were saying Democrats shouldn't support any of this. I'm not going to vote against establishing a China committee. There are security issues and economic issues. This week, we're going to vote on a bill that will show support of law enforcement and talk about defunding the police. There are issues, but the law enforcement in our communities keep us safe every single day. We don't thank them enough. They're not paid enough. They're getting grief from every sector. Why would someone want to be in law enforcement these days? We need to thank our law enforcement and show them support. And I told my car, I will not vote against that. There are clear incidences that have to be investigated. There are things that are not right. Life is not as clear-cut as everybody wants it to be. There's nothing worse than responding to a domestic abuse case or a mental health case. We got to make sure that we're training our law enforcement. They have the tools they need. We have a mental health crisis. I'm so off script already. But I'm going to say this to you. We have a mental health crisis in this country. We don't have the caregivers. We don't have the providers. We don't have psychiatrists going into the field. Our kids, adults too, but our young people, we love you. You're stressed. You're suffering from anxiety. You don't know what your future is. Too many people are drinking or taking drugs to treat that anxiety, that depression. Let's take the stigma off of mental health and invest in the resources and help our law enforcement be able to deal with the situations that are coming out of the lack of mental health treatment as well. So, again, that's the truth. Okay, so now I'll start to talk about other real things. Let's talk about, you heard last week, we hit the budget, debt ceiling. And I'm going to tell you point blank that I think holding our economy hostage for political showmanship is dangerous and it accomplishes nothing. And by the way, this is since 1960, it's been raised 49 times under Republican presidents, and I can't remember the exact number, like 29 or 30 under Democratic presidents. You should not hold the debt ceiling. That's our national economy, it's economic security, and it is national security. We cannot default on our debts. That's what it is. It'll have devastating impacts that primarily hurt working families. It could cause a recession. It could delay Social Security payments and spiking interest rates. It's just simply not a partisan issue. During the Trump administration, Republicans voted 3 times to raise the debt ceiling under President Trump. And by the way, voting for that doesn't increase our spending. We need to balance our budget. We have to work together to reduce our budget deficit. But here's the reality. Last year, President Biden reduced the budget deficit by $1.7 trillion. I think it's trillion, maybe it was billion. I gotta check that. I'm doing this from my head, dangerous guys. But it's the largest single reduction that's happened in the history of this country. And when President Trump reduced which is why it had to be raised 3 times, reduced taxes on the billionaires and the corporations, we've had the single biggest budget increases that we've seen. So I just, we've got to do it, and we've got to look, and we got to get this done. We got to raise it. We got to talk about budget reductions, and we got to do it in a way that's safe. So, I'm going to tell you, yes, there was actually something Donald Trump said last Friday that I was happy to hear. He warned Republicans not to cut Medicare and Social Security. Our seniors rely on that. That's important. So we got a lot of tough issues ahead of us. Here in Michigan, I'm glad that we're starting the year off right. At the very end of last year, before Christmas, I talked about that omnibus bill, and we passed $36 million of direct investments into the Downriver communities. From projects from clean energy initiatives and PFAS remediation to infrastructure upgrades, workforce training, and conservation. Funding that included $700,000 for the Downriver Community Conference for skills training, jobs placement, and supportive services to help connect people with good paying jobs. $4.1 million for gap and intersection improvements for the Downriver Link Greenways trail system to help provide green space for all of our residents to enjoy. $3.4 million to upgrades to the wastewater treatment facility in Grosse-Ile, which I visited just last week for an update on their plans about how they're going to keep our water clean and safe. We're not going to have discharges into the Detroit River. $1.8 million for the homeless shelter system in Wayne County, which will support the rehabilitation, renovation, improvement, and launch of an emergency homeless shelter system for adults. So many people work on that issue downriver. I just went to the new shelter that was opened in Taylor. Thank you to everybody for what people do. And these are just a handful of examples. Making sure that federal funds reach our communities when they're most in need, where they're needed, is always going to be one of my top priorities. Another one of my continuing priorities is addressing pollution and contamination that we see way too often in this area. That affects everything from our soil to our drinking water and the air we breathe. Every single day, I'm hearing concerns from residents about clean water. And the fact of the matter is, here in Michigan, we understand water. We know how important it is to have access to clean water, how many don't have it, and what we have to do to protect it. Flint taught us, we've seen it in Benton Harbor, access to clean and affordable water is a basic human right. And it needs to be affordable. I'm very proud of what Lewis has helped us on this. I'm worried that we're looking at water shutoffs again. COVID, flu, RBS, all these, they're not over. And we tell people the most important thing that they can do is to wash their hands. Think about sanitary conditions, just the use of a bathroom or a kitchen. And think about the family that can't afford their water. We can't turn it off. We got to keep working to figure out how everybody has access to water. That's I think it's a moral human right that you should be able to have access to water. And well, it is. Thanks. I don't care if it's water. We work very hard. You all think of this, well, some of you do know me and think of me as intense, but Rashida had to keep me one day from killing the White House over this issue. And, at the CDC, I was trying to say water should be it should be. Water is a basic human right, period. So, and we got to get the lead out of pipes. I'm really proud that in the infrastructure bill, we got money to get the lead out of every pipe in this country. That's what we got to do. Kids need to have clean drinking water in schools. You need to have clean drinking water in your homes. You should not be worried about lead poisoning. And every mayor in here is involved in a process now where they're identifying pipes in their cities where their lead is, and we're going to get a program that's going to get this lead out of the pipes. And it requires cooperation, protecting our natural resources at all levels of the government, from federal, state, and local. I stay in very close touch with EPA, Eagle, and our local authorities. And there are a ton of problems here. We're very glad. We never thought we'd see the still come down, but it did. The cloud come down, and it did. Now we've got to redevelop that site. We've got a plume in Ann Arbor that is spreading. We know we've got PFAS contamination in the Huron River that can come down here and goes into the Detroit River. We've got recovering former industrial sites like Arkema and McLeod and more. Just look at what we've had. Nobody's going to forget what happened in Flat Rock. And then there was a second Flat Rock spill. It came from an old Ford plant, and Ford's been wonderful working on it. But the one in Flat Rock last year, because everybody's sensitive now, got identified. This oil slick was identified quickly. They got the proper, at the word they use, and it was contained, and they found the source. We had to work to do that. The hexachronium spill that was in the Huron River, that's a company I'm not happy with. And we all know how dangerous that chemical spill is. We've had 10 chemical spills in this old 12th new 6th district in the last 18 months. That's something we got to worry about and work together to make sure we're cleaning up. So I know I'm pretty intense on the subject, but the companies have been great in working with me, and I'm really proud of that. The Downriver Community Conference is managing one of the best brownfield programs in the country. That's here. People look at us and say, what Jim Perry and DCC is doing is how other communities should organize. Since 1999, the DCC Coalition has received about $20 million and has supported assessment or cleanup activities at over 300 brownfield sites. I'm going to work to continue to ensure we continue to get those resources to Downriver, making communities cleaner, healthier, more vibrant places to work, live, and raise a family. And I'll tell you, people here, I'm looking at a lot of people in this room, the young people, you keep making your voices heard. You demand we keep the environment and the energy firm. But I'm looking at seasoned faces in here. And McLeod Steel has to have been one of the toughest things we ever did. Now, a lot of opinions, but finally people came to the table. And while you had opinions, you didn't yell and get up before you might have yelled. But you got up from the table. You never got up from the table. We got to figure it out. We got a deal, and it's down. And we're continuing to clean up that site. We got 2 Superfund sites at sort of either end. EPA is bringing resources in. I've had the EPA administrator in, the Region 5, the regional director comes in regularly. It's, we got to make sure we keep doing it, and we got to redevelop it so that keep this a great area to live, but we got to bring economic development down here too, so we do have the jobs, we do have the tax base. DTE is the next challenge. We miss them. They're good. We know why they're closing. It's good for the environment, but that brings challenges. We work together. That's what we have to do. We have to work together to make sure this is a win for everybody in the community. Another one of the most critical ways we're making Downriver a more vibrant, prosperous place, with your help, is investing in our local businesses and workers. The auto industry is at a real inflection point, and I'm excited about our state's opportunity to lead this new era of mobility and reclaim our role as a world leader in auto innovation and manufacturing. Last September, the Detroit Regional Partnership Foundation received $52 million from the American Rescue Plan to launch the Global Epicenter of Mobility, which will support the advancement of a smart, secure, sustainable, and inclusive advanced mobility industry in Southeast Michigan. Our strengths that have driven the growth of the automotive sector for more than a century will help transform our area's economy into a robust and growing industrial mobility hub. We have the immense capability of a centuries-old auto industry, which should support this transition of cutting-edge mobility and help keep our region at the forefront of manufacturing and innovation across the globe. And I'm going to make sure the brown rivers don't get ignored. We got land, we got talent, we got a lot of people who care, and we got to work together, federal, state, and local level, to make sure that that is our future. And it's just something I believe deeply in, and I'm working with everybody on. We've seen firsthand the consequences of supply chain disruptions, and specifically the semiconductor chip shortage. Shifts were cut, workers were laid off, and people in this area, Flat Rock, Trenton, we don't worry about these plants. We got labor negotiations this year. I'm sorry, Stephanie, I don't mean to give you a heart attack, but I'm just focused on it this early. But I want those plants staying. They matter to our local economy. So please, all auto companies hear me say that. And our workers were impacted. I'd go to the UAW halls, and they've been laid off again. And they weren't, you couldn't get cars in the plant. How many people placed an order for a car or a truck, and you couldn't get it because we couldn't get the parts. So last summer, we finally passed the CHIPS and Science Act, which allocated $54.2 billion to build the semiconductor chip manufacturing and supply chain here in the United States, including $2 billion for what's called mature technology nodes, which is what our vehicles use, with priority for critical manufacturing in industries like the auto industry. We got to continue to strengthen our domestic supply chain, bring those jobs back home, help our economy. You know what the pandemic taught us? Suddenly, when you couldn't get PPE equipment, I was literally on the phone for a hospital that had hospitals in our region, talking to people in China, asking them to go inspect masks and gowns to make sure that they were up to a quality before they spent millions of dollars wiring it to try to get those back here to the United States. We cannot be dependent on another country for parts or for medicine. Do you know how much of our generic drugs are made in China? 90%. That, my friends, is only an economic security issue. That is the national security issue. And if the pandemic didn't teach us one thing, it better have taught us we need to be able to take care of ourselves and not have to depend on another country like China to make sure we have the medicine and the equipment that we need. That is going to be one of my number one priorities. Our supply chains are just one component of our infrastructure that we got to strengthen. We got to repair our roads and bridges, and we're starting to see it. We're probably tired of some of those cones. We got to expand access to broadband. We put money in there. Every home should have access to broadband. And as I already talked about, getting the lead out of pipes. We're seeing these investments in our communities. Last January, we received $112 million in the first round of that 5 years, with a $563.1 million investment for bridges in Michigan. A year ago, I know some of you thought it would never happen. Some of the people in Dingell know this. I was in, you remember I had this stupid perforated ulcer because I took too much Motrin, so be careful on Motrin. And I just finally had it. So I called, I'm sitting in the hospital with, haven't been able to eat in 5 days, tubes all over me. And I called the head of the Corps of Engineers and said, we are going to get this done today. I'm in the hospital, I've had it, and you aren't going to like what happens if we don't. And we did. And it got done, finally. And we got more bridges that need this. The closing of that Grozeel Bridge impacted the lives of so many residents and commuters and underscored how urgent the need is to fix our infrastructure. But then when we get it fixed, we need to maintain it. We did not maintain our roads and bridges for decades, and that is part of why they're so bad. And it's got to be a priority. We can't have partisan bickering anymore over some of these things, and that's one where we cannot do it. We've also seen the impacts of another major piece of legislation we passed, the Inflation Reduction Act. Not my favorite name, but it's going to be incredibly impactful over the coming years. Starting this year, individuals and businesses will be able to access tax benefits from many of the law's clean energy provisions. And also starting this year, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services will begin the Medicare Drug Price Negotiation Program and will announce the first 10 Medicare Part D drugs selected for this program by September. Effective January 1 this year, recommended preventative vaccines are free of charge for people with Medicare prescription drug coverage. Most notably, these vaccines include shingles and Tdap. This will provide significant savings, as the shingles vaccine alone can cost up to a few $100s. We need to get those vaccines. We need to, I just know too many people that aren't going to the dentist or getting an immunization or putting off health care because they simply can't afford it. And it's scary. Look, I just had to have a crown replaced and almost fainted when the doctor told me what the cost was going to be. People can't afford it. I thought about, should I pull the tubes? It's outrageous. The manufacturers will also need to pay rebates to Medicare if they increase their prices faster than the rate of inflation. Now, I'm saying it's way overdue for this. This went into effect last October. For decades, we've been paying higher prescription drug prices than people in other countries. How many people go to Canada to get their medicine? And it's time to put a stop to it. I think the thing that I'm the happiest about is the $35 a month insulin cap for Medicare beneficiaries, but also into effect January 1st. This is going to benefit more than 1 million Medicare recipients. Currently, nearly a quarter of Medicare beneficiaries taking insulin spend $70 to $100 a month. These are tangible, everyday cost-cutting measures, which we're going to continue to focus on in DC to help alleviate the stress of working families. Our work's not done, and I'm not going to tell you it isn't going to be complicated this next year. But I make you this promise. I've always worked across the aisle. Everybody here knows Fred Upton was my best friend, and I already miss him. But I talk to all the Republican members of our delegation regularly. I am very close to the chair of the new Republican chair of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. And I think the American people are tired of partisan victory. I think they want to see us get stuff done. And we got to stay. I don't think Republicans are going to get reelected if they don't focus on getting things done. And that is my commitment to you. You all know that expanding access to quality, affordable health care has long been and remains, it was John's, it was his father's, and it remains mine. Henry Ford Health System is one of the biggest employers in Wayne County, and I'm working closely with them to support our frontline healthcare workers and ensure that they can provide the critical services to our community. And, each of our hospital systems has different challenges, and there's several from different hospital systems here. The problems are unique to each of them. Henry Ford serves more uncompensated care. If you're sick, you need to be able to go to the doctor. Too many people don't. But when you're in an emergency, you got to go get health care. And you got to be able to do it. And we got to make sure that Henry Ford is a strong hospital system and that it continues to survive because it fills so many needs. And that is one of my commitments. Last September, FEMA granted $7.6 million. I helped get this, I admit it, to the Henry Ford Health to cover costs related to the COVID-19 pandemic. We just need to thank our frontline workers, the nurses, the doctors, just the people that clean the rooms. I'm looking at the law enforcement, all of our frontline workers, the firefighters, the law enforcement, but our healthcare workers went through so much and are still going through so much. I spend a lot of time with the nurses and the firefighters and the EMS. They don't know what they're getting. They don't know what's going to happen when they go out there. There are a lot of sick people that are still out there. And we got to make sure that we got the resources to take care of people when they need it. And I also last year was able to help secure $900,000 to help Henry Ford Wyandotte Hospital improve their facilities and to expand telehealth services. Telehealth is something, I was very negative about it 10 years ago or 8 years ago. I wasn't sure. And actually some people in this room helped me begin to realize its potential. Well, I'm going to tell you something. We saw telehealth services widely and successfully adopted during the COVID-19 pandemic. And now we got to ensure those resources stay. There are a lot of people who go into rural areas, the only way they can see the doctor is by that telehealth. For seniors and people with disabilities, traveling to a doctor's office can be a prohibitive barrier to receiving the care they need. And we cannot allow people who've come to rely on telehealth throughout the pandemic to have that resource taken from them. We need to do other things to fix it, by the way. If you live in Toledo, you can't do telehealth with Henry Ford or University of Michigan. But Toledo's closer those hospitals are closer to Toledo than many other places. So that's one of the things that I'm going to work very hard on. And I'm also proud that my Advancing Telehealth Beyond COVID-19 Act with Congresswoman Liz Cheney, was a bipartisan bill, was signed into law as part of that last funding bill to extend critical telehealth policies implemented during the pandemic through December 31st, 2024, while we try to make sure that telehealth is really here to stay. I'm going to continue to work to expand access to care, especially home and community-based care services, so that seniors and people with disabilities can get the care they need in the setting of their choice. And we'll also ensure care workers are receiving the pay and benefits that they deserve commensurate with the work. How many people do we know? You can't find caregivers. I lived this. I was lucky. I'm luckier than 99 and 9/10, and I know the nightmares that I experienced. But if you've been, caregivers can't find anybody. The caregivers are getting sick. They don't get any respite. Spouses are taking care of their spouses, and they're exhausted. There's nobody there to help take care of them or to give them a break or let them get a good night's sleep. We gotta worry about caregiving, period. Daycare is a serious problem. But senior care, I think, is one of the growing problems in our community. I had legislation that almost made it across the line last year, and I'm getting ready to reintroduce it, and we gotta just make sure we're taking care of caregiving at all ages. So I've been talking too long, so I'm gonna wrap up with one of the issues that's dearest to my heart, which is protecting and conserving our wildlife and environment. The wildlife refuge just down the road from us, as you heard at the beginning, was John's dream. And he never stopped strategizing, worrying, and planning for its future. The refuge is a shining example of what we can accomplish when we come together as a community to protect our natural resources. And that was a very public-private project with a lot of people. And I'm going to keep making sure that happens. In this year's government funding bill, I helped obtain $368 million for the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, which is an interagency program that works to address the most significant problems in the Great Lakes region and protect and restore and maintain the Great Lakes ecosystem. And their next project here is in the river, kind of down around Roseal and Trenton and all of that. And we got to make sure that we can't take that Detroit River, we can't take any of our water for granted. And we're going backwards, quite frankly. There was a new study last week, that showed if you eat a fish with PFAS, and it's like 90% of the people, or 90% of the, I gotta get this, I shouldn't give you statistics off the top of my head, but you're getting PFAS in your body. And the number of fish in this country that are caught that has PFAS, we gotta, I'm seasoned, not young, like you young people, but I grew up in St. Clair. And I was on the St. Clair River, and my favorite thing to do, and I did it every day when the weather was decent, was float in that water in a minute or two. Has to get in the way of the freighter, go stand in the buoy. Your parents would kill you if I did what I did. But that water was dirty. People don't realize how dirty that water is. We've cleaned it up, but we have to make sure we don't get invasive species. We can't go back. We got to worry about pollution. And it's important. I'm committed to passing my Recovery and America's Wildlife Act, which passed the last Congress with bipartisan support, until the last day. We almost got it done. We didn't, to address critical species recovery, boldly tackle pressing conservation needs, and prevent the need for more costly interventions in the future by investing in proactive state-based conservation efforts that will provide states and territories and Native American tribes the resources that they need to prevent at-risk species from becoming endangered. Do you know that 30% of our birds have disappeared since 1970? And 90% of our monarch butterflies. When I go to the wildlife refuge, everybody knows this down there, and I see the first monarch butterfly of the year, which is normally where I see it for some reason. I know it's John telling us, keep doing the work that you're doing. So, I guess I want to touch on one more issue because I know somebody's going to ask me about it, which is the border and immigration. You know what? We need comprehensive immigration reform, period. They haven't. Nobody wants to do it. It's too touchy, and too tough an issue and we don't get it done. Our border is out of control. And everybody talks about the southern border, but we're a border right here too. And we got to pay attention to what's happening in our own border. And the thing that, we've got small businesses, we need people, we've got farmers, we need people that need workers. And if there are people that are coming into our country that we gotta do comprehensive immigration reform. But the thing that scares me the most, because I know it, because I've lived it in my family, is fentanyl, which is killing our kids. It's killing people. They have no idea that the drugs that they think are safe that they're buying on the street has been laced with this. My cousin would kill me for saying this, but I had a cousin who was found last year with the needle in his arm, dead. His parents have yet to get over that. We gotta figure it out. And you see them simple or easy, like prohibition. Fentanyl is really dangerous. It isn't like marijuana. We got a drug problem in our country, and we can't just keep turning our heads on it. I don't know how to solve it. Somebody said to me, and I didn't talk about guns, but we know how we feel about guns. Everybody, another 33 mass shootings in the United States since January 1, 2023. These are tough issues. We don't like them. They get us all fighting. We need to actually try to solve some of these problems because they're a threat to all of us. So I know I probably talked too long, touched a lot of subjects. I care about a lot of things. I probably should end here and answer questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Great presentation as always. And I know there's a lot of heavy issues that you touched on and a lot of important questions as well. But we're going to start with something fun, but also very, very important. As you know, our good friend Don Skidmore is with us in the audience. Where's Don? Where are you, Don? Okay. So Don's always going to ask this question every single year, so I'm just going to read it right off of the card. So Don says, "Hey, Dad, what did you do for the refuge this week?"
It's John Dingell. Just putting we have to I said we got to make sure we keep the refuge strong. So I will always support you. You know that. I always tell them, I got the Secretary of Interior to even come down last year. So I love that refuge. I encourage everybody to go. And you just need to be outdoors or go. People see me down there fishing, and they can't believe I fish. And I'm a competitive fisher too. But I will always do everything I can to support it, Don. You know that. And we got to look to expand it, and we just got it. John Dingell would say to me every night, "Deborah, what have you done for the wildlife refuge today?" And it's his heart and soul. You can feel, I feel him whenever I go to the refuge. So thank you, Don.
Again, a lot of good questions here, and some of these questions I think would take 20, 30 minutes to answer. There's a lot in them, but we're going to start with this one. This is a state issue, Congresswoman, but knowing you've never shied away from any issue, no matter if it's state, federal, local, whatever. But one of the biggest issues that's facing our workforce and our employers right now is the change in the minimum wage law here in the state of Michigan coming on February 20th and the paid sick leave laws. So this question comes in. It says, do you support raising the minimum wage to $14 statewide across all industries? And perhaps maybe you can talk about your opinion about the upcoming change in the laws on February 20th.
I do think everybody should be paid a decent wage. So I have been in favor of raising the minimum wage. I just think we need to compensate people. We've seen, by the way, the pandemic has seen many people's wages go up, but with the law of supply and demand. I think what I'm really learning is how complicated restaurant workers are. And that tip pay that some restaurant workers who work in better restaurants make, somewhere with their tips, $30 to $100 at the very best restaurants. And you've got some restaurant workers that aren't. I was with Ari at Zoom and got a 2-hour tutorial on this last week, who is, by the way, supportive of raising the minimum wage, but it's very complicated. So, but I think, one of the reasons we're not seeing people go into caregiving is you've got people in caregiving that are working 2 jobs and still living below the poverty line. They don't have any benefits. We need to incentivize people to go to work, and daycare is the same thing. I mean, it's some manufacturing suppliers' salaries have gone up, and none of this is easy, but I do think we need to pay everybody a fair wage.
So this question here, I believe I understand what they're asking, suggesting that we perhaps shift funding around. But the question says, first starts with a statement. It says, you are correct. We do not invest in our roads and bridges enough for safe travel. So the question they have is, how much do we spend sending money to foreign governments, many of which disrespect the U.S.? So it sounds like they're suggesting we reinvest some of those funds.
So, and by the way, funding the roads is going to get more complicated as we move to electric vehicles, because right now we're paying and funding for the road. I mean, when I said we really need to invest and sustain these investments right now, it's paid for by a gas tax. So as people are using less gasoline, which we need to do for the environment, we're going to have to figure out how you pay for the use of the roads. Is it vehicle miles traveled? And there's a lot of discussion of that. But the bigger question is, you're talking about foreign aid. The foreign aid is, how many people do you think here think we should be supporting Ukraine? Some people are now saying that we shouldn't. But the fact of the matter is, the war that's happening in Ukraine is a fight for democracy everywhere. And we do have to take a very serious look at where we're spending our money and how we're spending our money, and are there programs that we should not be investing in? I'm all for that. But I do think that foreign aid is a national security issue, and making sure that we're not helping Russia or China become a bigger enemy of the United States is something that's important. And it's way too long a discussion to have here, but I could go country by country and talk about, okay, this is why we're doing that, or this is why we're doing that. But I am somebody who does think we need to support Ukraine, which is fighting for democracy for all of us.
Here's an interesting question, because we always talk about our champion, Congressman John Dingell, and of course, somebody who was absolutely critical to the success of the Downriver region. But this question points out the fact that a lot of the students in attendance today didn't have the opportunity we had to work with who was just a true champion for Downriver, right? And so the question says, could you talk a little bit about the legacy of Congressman Dingell? And it says, they know you mentioned John, but do not have any background on our beloved congressman.
Well, first of all, for the young people, he was my husband. And he died a couple of years ago. But he was, look, I think where I love my job is that I'm accountable to you every 2 years. I have to get reelected. And I don't believe in dynasties. I don't believe that I think you got to be accountable to the community that you come from. John Dingell was the longest serving member of Congress in the history of the United States. But he cared about, and he was like, you could not pigeonhole him to anything. He was a member, actually a founding member of the NRA, which will probably shock some of the young people, not some of the seasoned people who went duck hunting with him, and it made him the conservation expert that he is. But I will say to you, I myself have a different story on guns, which I've told and won't go into today. But John Dingell and I would talk to each other about guns. And he said before he died, times are changing. He was the author of all the main environmental legislation that we still, clean water, endangered species. John Dingell is, people say highway, and you can't think of, the young people cannot think about this today. I wasn't even here when it happened, and I don't know that anybody in this room was there in the 60s. But Although June, it was the DC. There's an article in the News Herald in the 60s of all the mayors at the DCC complaining against him for wanting to do the Clean Water Act. I don't even know if you know that, Jim Perry. He's just keeping a straight face. They're like, it's going to cost money. Can you imagine anybody now? I mean, I found this Drew Pearson column when I was cleaning out his papers of how they were being killed around the country for wanting to do the Clean Water Act. And everybody thinks the Clean Water Act came about because of the fire in Cleveland. Our Rouge River actually caught on fire 52 years ago now, 50. Rashida, I think Rashida Tlaib and I go out and on the water, and everybody gets ready to kayak every year. And we did the Rouge River, and the helicopters were above us. And I think they thought one of us was going to drown any instant and couldn't do it. And it was amazing to look at the Rouge River and to be down there and to see the Ford Rouge plant and see the painted turtles and the herring and how that's all been brought back. And that was John Dingell. John Dingell knew that we were losing the bald eagles and bears and fish, and that we needed to protect our species, and was the Endangered Species Act. NEPA, which is the National Energy and Environmental Policy Act, which is actually the basic standard for environmental regulations around the world, was John Dingell. He was a hunter, a conservationist. He loved the outdoors, and he knew and all the hunters here. I'm looking at Randy Fritz, who hunted with John. They know the importance of protecting our natural resources. So, you come from different perspectives. He was also, the auto industry is the backbone of the American economy and Michigan's economy. And he wasn't afraid to stand up for the auto industry and fight for the worker. His legacy is long, and I wish you all could have met him and known him. I have no idea how we ever got married. There was an age difference. I was Republican when I married John Dingell, which is true, maybe not the Republican of. I'm on the Gerald Ford, just so you know. I'm very proud of it, the Gerald Ford Library Board and the Gerald Ford School Board. I think it's important that people talk to each other. But John and I could have our fights, and John could have his fights with many people in this room. But he always listened. He never backed down from a fight, and the Downriver were his home and his community. Is that okay?
That was wonderful, and I had the opportunity to intern for Congressman Dingell when I was in college, and I remember when I first walked into his office, there was that big picture of him talking with President John F. Kennedy, and then there's so many other pictures, Harry Truman and so forth, and just when you walked into his office, it was intimidating, and he was truly a hero to everyone, not just Downriver, but all throughout the United States of America. And both Republicans and Democrats alike absolutely adored Congressman Dingell, and I think I'll always remember the impact that he had on my life personally, and almost everybody in this room feels that way as well. So just a couple more questions. We're running out of time, Congresswoman. What do you see as the economic future of your district as a whole, and Downriver in particular?
Strong, because we're all working together to keep it strong. It's when you see McCall Steel come down, there are a lot of business people in this room that are carrying and investing in this community. I believe that I just think there's so much, we got to look at it. I think federal, state, and local officials and community members, chambers, rotaries, all have to work together to keep your community strong. But I love the Downrivers. I think my district, I've now picked up, it's a big district. It's a different district. I have the Downrivers, which I love. I have all of Washington County, so I have Ann Arbor, which has one opinion of many things, and Western Washington. And I picked up a lot of the supplier communities. And Downriver has had suppliers like the Steels and the whatevers, but it's also had the OEM, for the kids, that would be the car manufacturers themselves, and there's a lot of suppliers. I want to keep Michigan diversifying. I want to bring those supply chains home. We've got the talent that we need. I want any of you young people moving away. We want to make sure we give you the skills and education that you need so you stay here and you protect our future. I love Michigan, and we got great future ahead of us.
So the final question, and I think you know what's coming. Charlie Langton is here from Fox 2, and we were thinking that maybe something would have been mentioned, but everybody wants to know, are we going to have a Senator Debbie Dingell in our near future? Okay, come on.
So a lot of us were surprised when Senator Stampen announced 2 weeks ago she wasn't running. And first of all, I want to say Michigan is a purple state. I've said at this forum that Donald Trump could win Michigan, then I said he was going to win Michigan. And I can't tell you how many people thought that I was absolutely crazy. Charlie was there when they were all telling me I was crazy. And I do want to keep that seat Democratic. I've had a lot of people call me. I've not said no. So don't interpret how I'm about to answer this question, which Charlie will. You know what? Do you know who I am? I'm the person that's at every festival. I'm the person that's at the Wildlife Refuge. I'm the person that goes to farmers markets, the Dexter Forum, the Ypsilanti Forum, tourist plants, goes to DCC meetings, sits down with my fire chiefs and my police chiefs, sits with the mayor and BASF and talks. I like my communities. I want to know who's speaking to who's not speaking to who, what's coming up, what the problems are, what we need to do, and how we bring people together to fix them. And that's who I am. To run for the United States Senate, you have to raise $50 to $70 million, hard dollars. And then another 50 to 60 soft. You look at the fundraising money. Anybody who knows me knows that there's nothing I hate more than making those kind of fundraising costs. I'd rather be in Randy Fritz's office having yell at me, which doesn't happen a lot, and it ain't pleasant. And I love them. So, but I haven't said no, because a lot of people, we gotta make sure we have a winning candidate. So we're doing we're getting the information, everybody is. It's not one person. I'm working with the governor and the lieutenant governor and the attorney general and the secretary of state and my other congressional colleagues. And looking at what's going to happen, and I think we all want to make sure that we have a strong candidate for next year. So I know how Charlie's going to interpret that. I have not said no yet. Don't put